conference being held this morning in Mandeville, our first such event in Mandeville. The cool temperature is a welcome respite from the heat of Kingston. I acknowledge the presence of Mrs. Michaela Rowe, President of the Manchester Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Mrs. Rowe. The format of this morning's function is as follows. We will hear from Governor Richard Byles as he presents the bank's latest monetary policy decision in the context of the bank's outlook for inflation and the overall economy against the background of the economy's performance for the last quarter. Mr. Byles will be supported by Senior Deputy Governor Dr. Wayne Robinson and Deputy Governor Dr. G.D. Lewis, as well as Deputy Governors Celeste McCullough and George Roper, who have joined us online. After Mr. Byles' presentation, the floor will be open to allow for the question and answer segment. Mr. Byles, over to you.
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Bank of Jamaica's quarterly monetary policy report press conference. We are indeed pleased to be hosting our second press conference for 2026 in another location other than our headquarters in Kingston. Today, we are happy to be in Mandeville, Manchester, which is considered to be the heart of central Jamaica. Of course, the economy of Mandeville has evolved far beyond its early fame for agriculture, notably coffee growing, mining and community tourism. And later today, I will have an opportunity to discuss economic issues with stakeholders from central Jamaica, including Manchester, Clarendon, St. Elizabeth, and southern Trelawney. Ladies and gentlemen, it is common knowledge that geopolitical tensions, particularly in the Middle East, have heightened significantly since our last press conference in February. The hostilities have resulted in extensive damage to critical oil and gas infrastructure in several countries of the Middle East and have disrupted shipping activity in the Strait of Hormuz, a key route for global oil and gas shipments. Given the uncertainty surrounding the duration of the conflict and the extent of damage to the infrastructure, recovery could be slow and protracted. Against this background, for us in Jamaica, the global shock has heightened the risk of headline inflation rising beyond the current 4.3% recorded in April. At the same time, the confluence of external factors arising from the Middle East conflict also poses risk for lower domestic economic activity over the near term. In this context, Bank of Jamaica's Monetary Policy Committee decided unanimously at its meeting last week to keep the policy rate unchanged at 5.5% per year. The MPC also decided that Bank of Jamaica will continue special measures to preserve stability in the foreign exchange market, including directly supplying the foreign exchange needs of selected entities in the energy sector. We will also continue to assure the market of the predictability of foreign exchange flows by maintaining the pre-announcement of the timing and size of BFIXit flash sale interventions. The decision to maintain the policy rate reflects the bank's assessment that the current policy stance remains appropriate to help limit later or second-round effects from the external price shock and support inflation levels within the target range of between 4 to 6% over the medium term. Regarding specific impacts, the rise in international oil prices is expected to place upward pressure on electricity costs in Jamaica. Domestic gas prices have already risen and may accelerate further, with implications for transport-related inflation. Beyond these direct effects, higher energy and transport costs are also expected to contribute to second-round increases in the prices of other goods and services across the economy. Inflation in Jamaica is therefore forecast to trend upward over the June to September 2026 quarters, beyond the 6% upper limit of the bank's target range. This will be mainly driven by supply and cost pressures, including 1, increased energy and transport-related inflation due to rising crude oil prices, and 2, the second-round impact of higher energy-related inflation on prices of other goods and services, coupled with higher spending related to post-hurricane reconstruction efforts. Second-round price increases are most likely in areas such as routine house maintenance, as well as in the prices of food and personal care items. The extent of the breach of the inflation target range will depend on the severity and duration of the Middle East conflict. Those variables are highly uncertain. As geographical tensions ease and global oil supplies return to normal levels, headline inflation in Jamaica is forecast to gradually moderate and return to the target range. At the same time, the projected moderation in inflation is expected to be partly offset by domestic demand pressures stemming primarily from fiscal spending to support rebuilding following Hurricane Melissa. The risks to inflation are assessed to be skewed to the upside, which means that inflation could be higher than projected. The main upside risk is a more extended and broader conflict in the Middle East, resulting in further increases in international commodity prices and their subsequent impact on domestic prices. In addition, adverse weather conditions, including the effects of El Nino, could place upward pressure on agricultural prices. Higher than projected inflation expectations could also contribute to inflationary impulses. Further, higher inflation may arise from a stronger than anticipated impact of higher domestic spending amid the post-hurricane recovery activities. On the downside, the impact of those factors on prices could be tempered by reduced demand because of energy costs taking up a larger share of consumers' disposable income. Let me now briefly highlight some recent economic developments, starting with a closer look at the most recent inflation outturn. On the 15th of May, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica reported that headline inflation at April 2026 was 4.3%, within the bank's target range and in line with the outturn at March 2026. Core inflation, which excludes the prices of agricultural food products and fuel from the Consumer Price Index, rose slightly to 4.1% at April 2026, from about 4% at March of the same year. However, as we noted earlier, there are considerable upside risks to inflation going forward. Looking at developments within the real economy, for the financial year 25-26, the bank now anticipates a decline in real GDP in the range of -1% to -2%. With a gradual recovery of the economy for 2026-27 and for 2027-28, real GDP growth is forecast to be within the range of 1 to 3%. Real GDP is also projected to grow at an average of 1 to 2% over the medium term. Turning to the balance of payments, the negative impact of the conflict on the country's external accounts is projected to be significant, with the current account balance expected to deteriorate over the near term. This deterioration will be largely underpinned by higher imported fuel prices and increased importation to facilitate the economy's infrastructure rebuild post-Hurricane Melissa. In addition, the deterioration reflects the adverse impact of Hurricane Melissa on the tourism industry. In this context, the bank anticipates that the current account balance will fall within a range of a deficit of 0.5% of GDP to a surplus of 0.5% for the financial year 2025 to 26, compared with a surplus of 3% of GDP recorded in 2024-25. Despite the temporary fall-off in tourism earnings so far, the foreign exchange market has remained relatively stable. On the 19th of May 2026, the exchange rate had appreciated on a year-over-year basis by 0.5%, compared with a depreciation of 1.7% over a year earlier. This stability occurred in the context of the bank's continued actions to reduce volatility in the foreign exchange market as part of its strategy to lower inflation expectations and contain inflation within the target range. Cumulatively, BOJ sold US $1.3 billion via its BFIXIT facility over the 12 months to end April 2026. This was $200 million more than the $1.1 billion sold over the previous 12 months. Notwithstanding these sales, however, the bank purchased US $906.4 million more than it sold in the 12 months to April 2026. Jamaica's gross international reserves have also remained robust, standing at US $6.5 billion as at the 19th of May 2026, representing about 139.6% of the measure considered adequate. This strong level of reserves provides an important buffer against external shocks. Going forward, Jamaica's foreign reserve levels are expected to remain adequate over the medium term and will support the orderly functioning of the foreign exchange market, helping to limit volatility and thereby containing imported inflation. The domestic financial system remains sound with adequate capital and liquidity. To conclude, the recent geopolitical tensions have introduced significant uncertainty and challenges to the economic outlook. However, Bank of Jamaica remains committed to its primary mandate of maintaining price stability. As such, the bank will continue to closely monitor the incoming data and assess the implications for inflation and inflation expectations. The MPC is prepared to adjust its monetary policy stance if the conflict in the Middle East is protracted, resulting in sustained price increases. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll take your questions now.
Hello? Hello?
Good morning. Al, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can. If you could speak a little louder, please.
Can you hear me, Mel?
Yes, I can, Al. Could you just speak a little louder,
All right.
please?
Okay. Is this the last briefing with Governor Biles?
We're hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes. Is this the last quarterly briefing with Governor Biles?
No, Al, there's another one to come, so save your question for that one. We know what the question is.
Well, I'll just take this opportunity. You never know. But I'd like to say this, that you have done a fantastic job as the governor. You put an imprimatur of professionalism over your tenure. I think it must be said that you presided over a time where we had COVID, a time where we had wars, a time where we had the economy going through a degree of contraction. You've done a marvelous job, and I think the country can be proud of what you've managed to achieve in your tenure as governor of the Bank of Jamaica. And I'm sure we can all agree with that.
Appreciate those remarks, Al. It has been my pleasure to serve the country through the Bank of Jamaica.
Okay, we have a second question from someone whose name is not visible. ZTE. Please go ahead and identify yourself and the organization that you represent, please.
Hello? Hello?
Good morning, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Durant. I have a new phone, so I don't know how to manipulate it. I hear the governor saying to Al that there's going to be another briefing and that particular questions would be answered then. I guess it's the same question I would ask. So I will leave it aside until that meeting. But a quick one though, Governor. Based on your tenure, what would be you regard as your success during your tenure, and what would be those matters that you would have liked to continue but would not be able to continue?
Durant, that's a question that requires a long answer, but I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I think that leading the Bank of Jamaica as an independent central bank has been a profound experience. Remember that changed in 2022, and all of our operational tasks and activities became independent of government at that time. So it's been quite an experience to run a central bank in Jamaica for the first time in an independent fashion. And I would say that having done that for nearly 5 years, to some success, I think, would be a major accomplishment. Of course, as Al suggested earlier, we went through some very difficult times, exactly at the point at which we became an independent bank. We had COVID, then we had a worldwide global inflation, and the Middle East crisis, the war in Ukraine. So it's been crisis after crisis. But, you know, at the bank, we have a tremendous staff. And no matter what crisis is happening out there, they're heads down doing the work of the country. And I'm forever grateful for the quality of support that they have provided me over the years. So that all that you see the Bank of Jamaica doing really comes down to the work that the staff have put in consistently day after day. I would have liked to have seen Jamdex be more successful. We continue to knock at the door of the commercial banks to get their point-of-sale machines retrofitted. And I would count that as a disappointment, that it has taken us years to get the banks to make that transition. Other than that, I would say, I've had a very good tenure at the bank, made some great friends, and I know that even after I leave, that those friendships will continue.
Siobhan Campbell, would you like to go ahead with your
Another
question?
quick one, Governor. Based on the fact that inflation will not be within the target range of 5 to 6% over the next 12, 15 months, is the bank willing to shift its inflation rate target within a more meaningful, manageable, and achievable rate?
No, I think the 4 to 6% is set by the government of Jamaica on the advice of the Bank of Jamaica, yes, technical advice. But they have set that range because it suits the economy as it currently stands. To move that range up or down would require, Are we still connected, Melanie?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Yes.
Well, I'm
if-
still here, Governor,
Okay.
waiting on the response.
Right. So if we move that range down, it means we would have to tighten. That means higher interest rates. If we move the range up, it means that we could loosen, lower interest rates, but then inflation would be higher, and that would be a burden on Jamaicans. So I think that the range we're in is appropriate, and I don't think that circumstances globally require us to make that change at this time.
Okay, Governor. Governor?
Yes, hearing you.
We can hear you. Please identify yourself.
Calvin G. Brown. Wire J. Aye. What's all of this?
Can you close?
I imagine.
Mr. Brown, where you're echoing, could you close one of your mics, please? Mr. Brown? All right. yeah.
Hello, I'm there. Am I there?
Yes,
Yes.
we're hearing you now.
Yes, you are.
Oh. All right. I imagine that in setting the policy rate and deciding on what other monetary policy tools to deploy, the BOJ has to carefully weigh the options of, on the one hand, going for policies that restrain inflation, even if they inhibit growth, and on the other hand, growth-inducing policies like lowering interest rates and allowing a greater level of exchange rate depreciation, which might make exports and the tourism sector more competitive, but which might fuel inflation. How does the central bank strike the balance?
Always a difficult challenge, but we do have a mandate. This is what was set in law by Parliament for the Bank of Jamaica. We are the guardians of price stability and financial system stability. If anything goes wrong in those areas, it's the Bank of Jamaica solely that is responsible for that. It does have some effects that flow over into the rest of the economy, and we are cognizant of that and sensitive to those overflowing effects. However, we always have to be true to the mandate and do the best we can to keep inflation within the range and to make sure that the financial system remains stable and well capitalized. That is our mandate.
Okay. I see that the BOJ is developing its business continuity center at another location in Kingston. Why not a location outside of Kingston like Mandeville or Montego Bay to mitigate risks that might affect all of Kingston, but not necessarily all of Jamaica?
You know, coming to Mandeville this morning too, I'm saying, wait, this could be a nice site, it's cool. But then we just lost power, so I'm not sure. But we try to find a site that doesn't have the same risk that we do on the waterfront. So we're not on the same fault line that the waterfront is on. So that's a major difference for us. And we're also still fairly central that we can carry out our duties to do with cash distribution and so forth. So it's a good compromise where we have chosen.
Okay. And finally, for now, for me, what is the bank doing in commemoration of its 65 or its 65th milestone anniversary? The bank having May 1961.
That's an excellent question, and I'm going to pass it over to the lady who knows about it more than anybody else here. Yes, you don't want.
Thank you for that question. So BOJ at 65. We have taken a smart integration approach to the celebrations, and what that means is we're weaving the celebrations into already existing activations, and we'll be starting this Sunday with our ecumenical service, and that paves the way for the week of recognition for our employees. So we're looking inwards and we're also looking outwards. Now, in relation to outwards, we have we've partnered with Project STAR under the Propel initiative, and that will see us reaching youth and facilitating, as part of our financial literacy program, the development of and empowerment of our youth. We'll also be launching our graduate internship program. So that is new under the celebrations, and you will see something about that in the coming weeks. So we're allowing meaningful opportunities for our just concluded university students, opportunities to be exposed to the central bank. The areas that we're focusing on could be in cybersecurity, economics, to name a few. So there's more to come in relation to that. And we also have a competitive element. So we'll see user-generated content. We'll be reaching out to teenagers across all high schools, all 14 parishes, and they will share a little bit about what they know about the role and function of the central bank. So that is competitive, so I won't tell you anything more about that. So both the students and the institutions will also benefit in that regard. So in a nutshell, we're looking at our staff, we're looking at communities, and every Jamaican we serve. Thank you.
Indeed, thanks.
Good morning. I apologize. I'm a little under the weather. I tried to get through this without too much issue. But just two questions, Governor Miles. The first one is a run-on a question you partially answered earlier. In relation to the Jamdex and its rollout, the last time you were at the podium, so to speak, you raised concern about the sluggish nature in which the commercial banks were adapting to the new system. Under the circumstances, since you made that outcry, has there been any meaningful attempt, so to speak, from the commercial banks to get things moving along? And to connect to that question, under the circumstances, do you see the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority as a potential avenue to speed things up in terms of the adoption of Jamdex? That's the first question. The second one is in relation to inflation. Under the circumstances, we know there's a lot of inflationary pressures, both coming from outside due to global concerns and as well as Hurricane Melissa internally. As we stand now, there is an agitation on behalf of private-public passenger operators wanting a increase in their fares that they could potentially charge to consumers. Is there a potential further risk there in terms of the inflation forecast from a potential increase in fares from PPVs as well?
Well, let me start with the second question, and then I'll ask Mario to speak on the Jamdex issue. Yes, we understand and appreciate that there's going to be pressures because, you know, the price of crude internationally has risen tremendously. And in our forecast, we would have taken into account that there will be increases. I don't know what the amount of the fare increase might be or when, but we have a general estimate that we have included in our forecast. So that's taken care of. Mara, you want to speak on Jamdex?
Have one DTI that has come to the gate, and they're working with us, and I believe by July the 26th, right, of July this month, we will have one DTI who would have retrofitted their point-of-sale device for Jamdex, while the others have indicated a later time frame, and that would be by Q1 2027. So we do have some traction. We have received also some timelines and costing from a few other DTIs. So there is traction, but albeit slow. In terms of NARA and the utilization of NARA to facilitate that process, that is something we will have to consider and see how best we can facilitate.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are there any further questions?
Yes, I have one. I have noticed over a period that a lot of entities keep surrendering their Cambio license. From a marketing perspective, Governor, and a regulator perspective, can you say why this is so?
In terms of the Cambios that have been surrendering, I think this has been voluntary surrenders, and that is based on the institutions or the individual institutions' ability to continue that type of business. Sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's the spread, but it's strictly a decision, a business decision that these entities have taken.
Yes, I'm aware that it's voluntary, but I'm asking what are the marketing dynamics that's happening that would influence such a business decision?
Spread mostly, you know, if in trading you can't make the spread that you want because the situation, the market is competitive, or if you're not trading the volume you used to, those are two good reasons why you wouldn't be in business. So we think that mostly that those are the reasons.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Al.
Governor, we've heard that both the PIOJ and Statin pronounced that there has been consecutive quarters of contraction in the economy. We see the inflationary landscape kind of escalating. We're hearing about bombings again taking place in Iran. How do you see things going forward, say over the next 2 quarters? What's your take?
I'm going to ask the Senior Deputy Governor to answer that, Al.
Thanks for that question. Morning, everyone. Well, for Jamaica, over the next 2 quarters, we're going to continue to see, certainly on the growth front, the continued lag effects of Melissa. We know, for example, that a number of hotel entities are still out. A number of them have used the occasion to refurbish. So we certainly expect to see muted economic activity over the next 2 quarters. And this comes on top of the fact that we've had this additional shock from the Ukraine-US war, the Iran conflict, which is going to affect people's own consumption, their real disposable incomes. They won't be able to spend as much. There'll also be added uncertainty. But we expect, though, that in the second half of the year, we'll begin to see some recovery from the effects of Melissa. And we hope, depending on what happens in the Middle East, that the tensions could moderate or would moderate over the next 2 to 3 months, which would then allow for some softening in energy prices and hence overall inflation.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Are there any further questions?
Morning.
I would love if the governor could disclose the identity of that banking institution that will be retrofitting to Jamdex, so I can shift my banking account to that entity.
Well, go ahead, Mario.
Sure. So that DTI is JN Bank.
Anything further, Durant? All right. Is there anybody else? I heard somebody else started a question.
For some reason, I'm not hearing the answer.
Okay, that DTI is Jamaica National Bank.
All right, thank you very much.
Morning, may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Luke Douglas from Gleaner here. With respect to the move towards Jamdex and the efforts to use less cash in the society, there's a viewpoint that certain sectors, for example, the gambling sector, persons who buy lotto, the agricultural markets like Coronation Market, fish vendors and so on, they tend to continue to use cash, and unless these sectors are brought into the system, then the efforts won't be as successful as hoped. What are the views on this?
Yeah, well, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we haven't been able to test that in Jamaica. However, I would say that in other countries of the world, in Brazil, in Kenya, in India, a lot, in fact, most of those small transactions happen in a digital way. It's just far easier once you have that infrastructure in place. And whilst there will be some people who prefer cash for whatever reasons, cash will be around. So there's no danger that Jamdex will take out all cash. It won't. But it will facilitate far more efficient payments. And the proof of that, you know, in Brazil, 70% of transactions that are small occur digitally. And in India, it's probably even higher than that. And Kenya, similarly. Big success stories. And I think that Jamaica is no different. You know, everybody has a phone. Everybody knows how to use that phone. And Jamdex is phone-based. It's just that when you go to a merchant that has a POS machine and doesn't use a phone, then you have to retrofit that POS machine. But from person to person to small business, you can use Jamdex. And I think many Jamaicans will adopt that.
Governor, hello?
Go ahead, Al.
Hello? Just following on from Luke's question, when you talk to many financial institutions about why don't they go ahead with the POSs and what's the delay, they tend to say to you, well, look, the cost is prohibitive, it's going to have an impact on their operational costs. Then they also throw in, well, look, we could do it, but we're impeded by the asset tax. What do you say to that? What's your view on that?
The asset tax is beyond my pay grade, so I have no comment on that. But yes, it does cost to retrofit the POS machines, and we have made an offer to all the banks that we at Bank of Jamaica will pay for half of that cost. These machines need to be upgraded anyway. So it's a good deal if Bank of Jamaica steps in and says, let me pay half the cost to retrofit all of your machines. So I think we have put a good proposition to them, and I'm hoping they will take it up shortly.
But why don't they see it, Governor? You're right in that respect, but why don't they see it as an investment in the future, that they will perhaps gain more revenues, get more volumes of business, if they make the investment now for the future? After all, they're bankers. Isn't that what banking's all about?
Yes, and let me say, I, unlike Senior Deputy Governor, didn't come straight from university to BOJ. I went through the financial system, so I have some idea of how they think on that side. And let me tell you, a lot of the banks, they have technology challenges, and it costs a lot of money to fix those challenges. So in a way, we understand that putting another challenge to them, that costs money, that is technological, it has to kind of join the line. So we appreciate that, but the line has been there for 2 years now, and we think that it shouldn't take much longer to get it done. So what I would say is that if I were in the private sector in banking, a lot of the bad reputation that banks have to do with cash. Customers complaining about ABMs being down, not available. Dr. Lewis beside me can speak to that. So even from a reputational point of view, it is a good investment to take up Jamdex, be a front runner, make it efficient and make it work. Take some of the pressure off of your cash supply. So I'm hoping that their eyes will open to that benefit.
To your point, Governor, and Jide can come in here, we just had a holiday. So many ABM machines are out of service. You have to travel literally. You got to literally travel across the country to find a machine to get some cash out. What's that all about?
Okay, so I think this is a good run on, Al, that, if you have, especially on holidays or payday, if every adult Jamaican is going to an ABM, to withdraw maybe $10,000, $15,000, which is the average withdrawal amount across the system, you'd need to increase the capacity of ABMs by about 4. So there is actually a limit, because each ABM machine can hold maybe 6,000 notes. So there's a physical capacity limit, particularly around holidays, particularly around payday, where the majority of working Jamaicans will be going to these machines. We have about 850 working ABM machines across the island. And I think, to the governor's point, it's for the bankers to see that the trade-off between quadrupling their capacity and investing in a technology that allows them to have some of that cash demand absorbed by digital currency. The trade-off is obvious. So again, I'm only repeating what the governor says, is for them to see that trade-off and to see that they are going to be winning in the final analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Durant, you have your hand up?
Right. The governor response a while ago triggers this question. Based on the commitment you gave to underwrite a part of the cost, I think you mentioned 50% of retrofitting the POS machines to use Jamdex. this case of Jamaica National, are you doing this? Are you underwriting this cost?
Of course. In fact, we may even have paid already. I'm not sure, but we will.
All right. Any
Noted. Secondly, I have this running issue with GD regarding the reporting on the ABMs, because BOJ publishes a matrix based on what they get from the individual banks. And they are reporting that upwards of 96, 97, even 98% of the machines are working. And I've said to him that I have gone to some of them and they aren't working.
They weren't working
They aren't
yesterday.
working.
Sure.
So
let me
I
jump on
have
that.
said that I think the BOJ need to individually do a survey on some of these machines to verify the information that they are getting from the individual banks, because I don't believe this is the case.
Okay, so thanks for the question. So when you're looking at an overall island-wide report, the average may not reflect what you as an individual will be experiencing in your community, your neck of the woods. So for example, in Manchester, coverage for ABMs, in number of machines that are up, vary from 89% to 95%. So that's a very wide margin. When you're looking at the number of hours it takes to repair ABM in Manchester, it varies from 6.5 hours to 2.5 hours. When you're looking at the uptime, again, you're looking at wide ranges, probably 85% up to 93%. So we are aware, and when you look at the individual parish outturns, you can see that variability. What the standard is saying is that the minimum should be, if you have 10 machines or 100 machines, 90 of those should be working. Of that 90, those 90 machines, they should be up 95% of the time. And if they're down, they should be repaired within 3 hours if you're in rural Jamaica, and if you're in KMA, 1 hour. We're seeing where over time, the time to repair or bring machines back up is improving. We're not seeing where they are meeting the 95% uptime. Most banks are at around 90%. But the coverage, meaning the number of ABMs that are available, is meeting the 90% target. Of course, that means nothing to you if you're in a location where the 10% are not working. So those, I would say, community level outturns can coexist with the overall national average being at or near to the standard.
Thank you, Dr.
I take the point, Dr. Lewis, but for me, I'm cynical, right? I believe nothing I hear and only half of what I see. And I have an issue with the banks themselves publishing these updated uptime. And my experience is different. And other experience from other people is different. And I've said, let us test the veracity of the information you get. Let us do a random sample and test to see if these uptime that the banks are reporting are in fact true and accurate.
Is it the case? Is it the case?
I would have said that we do intend to do our own evaluation. Of course, October of last year, we got hit by Melissa. It's 7 months on, but several of the banks, particularly in the parishes that have been mostly affected, are still not up to what they were before the hurricane. So it's something we intend to do, but we have delayed that program so that banks can focus on bringing their branches online and getting things back to a sense of normalcy. But it's something we intend to do. Hopefully by the next 2 QMPRs, we'll have something to update where that's concerned.
Let me just add just to add on to what Judea says, one of the constraints that we have at Bank of Jamaica is that we don't have the legal backing. In other words, we don't have the right in law to do anything more when it comes on to some issues of market conduct and customer service. And that is why we have been pushing for this concept of Twin Peaks, where you will have a regulator, one regulator, which is the Bank of Jamaica, looking at all of the financial sector from a prudential point of view, and another regulator, the Financial Services Commission, which will look at all of the financial sector from a market conduct and customer protection point of view. That in that scenario, the laws around customer service and how to conduct yourself in the market will be much stronger and will give that regulator the right to intervene and to make sure, to put it that way, to make sure that the way in which ATMs operate, that it's up to standard. And if they are not, that there is a penalty for that. As it stands now, there is no penalty, and we don't have the right to implement a penalty. So the Twin Peaks concept is important for Jamaicans and for the financial sector going forward in the next couple of years.
All right, thank you, Governor. The last question goes to Siobhan Campbell. Please go ahead.
Good morning again. Just a follow-up to that same question. I think you could handle this one, Jide. But under the circumstances, isn't it concerning that in a regulatory environment where the standards for ATM upkeeps were set in collaboration with the commercial banks, so it was something that they agreed to, they can't meet that standard even in their own self-reporting? Meaning that they are the ones sending in the reports, and even in those reports that they're sending, they're not meeting the standard. And secondly, I've always wondered, is it not possible to take this matter of ATM outreach, or say ATM rollout and maintenance, out of the hands of commercial banks and put it through into an authority or entity whose sole purpose is the maintenance of those machines?
All right, thank you for those questions. So, your first question, the governor has sort of framed it. To have a consumer protection framework, you not only have to have the legal authority to require banks to do certain actions in relation to how they treat their customers, you also have to have what is called a redress mechanism, which is where by law that authority can stand between the customer and the bank and sort of arbitrate on decisions to do with fairness. That is what is being proposed under the Twin Peaks framework for the authority that will have the mandate for consumer protection. And under that arbitration power, you can have sanctions. So that's what is missing from what where we are today. In 2026, what we have is a code that it ensures that banks are clear on their obligations. What we don't have, what Jamaica doesn't have at this point, is a full redress mechanism that then, when there's non-compliance, you have sanctions. And so that is where the proposals are moving towards, where there's a legal authority with a mandate and with the necessary mechanisms to enforce redress. So that's sort of the North Star. Where we are today, we have issued a standard, yes. We can monitor against that standard, but in terms of non-compliance, the legal framework is not attuned. And the governor spoke earlier on what the mandate of the Bank of Jamaica is. The mandate of the Bank of Jamaica is price stability and financial system stability. So that focus is really centered around whether or not the balance sheets are strong, whether or not when your funds are safe, whether or not the banks are making profits and therefore can increase their capital over time. That's really where the entire legal framework at the Bank of Jamaica is. It's not grounded in issues to do with customer service. And so therefore our current sanctions would be, we would take away your license. Do you want to take away the license of a bank that doesn't have an ABM working in Mandeville? It may sound like a good solution now, but tomorrow morning when you do have the bank in the parish, it's a different, you have created a whole new set of problems. So that's a long-winded answer. I hope it's clear in terms of where we are now and hopefully from a policy perspective where we will land in the near future. In relation to your second question, can you refresh my memory? You asked two questions.
Okay, sorry. The second question is in relation to ATMs. Would it be possible for an authority or entity outside of the central banks, outside of the commercial banks, to actually maintain and operate them so that you have a more streamlined outroll of them?
Sure. So that's a very good question. So let me answer it in two ways. One is that currently banks have the responsibility for managing all deposit-taking activities, including managing their infrastructure with ABMs. What they do now under this current framework is that they can outsource some of those activities to third parties. Some of those third parties help them to transport the cash to and from branches and to and fro the central bank. Some of them have outsourced the security at the ABM's vestibules, whether they're particularly for those that are in branches. Some of them have outsourced the monitoring of the ABM performance to third parties. Jamaica has a very cash-intensive society. I think upwards of 55% of all transactions are done using cash. So from an anti-money laundering perspective, having a third party take on that responsibility wholly and separate from a bank is problematic, because what it means is that now, currently under our law, we're holding the bank accountable for every single dollar that it receives and every single dollar that it pays out. When you have a framework where there's now a third party that's taking on cash management, if $10 million is lost or $100 million is lost, who is accountable for that, and what is their responsibility or accountability for the loss of that 10 million or 100 million? It complicates our whole framework for money laundering. BOJ prints the cash, or we outsource that. We hold it in our vaults. The bank then commissions a third party to pull it from the bank into their vaults and to fill their ABM machines. And so you can trace the flow of that cash to the customer, and then of course the customer spends it in the real sector and it flows back into the ABM. It's a closed circuit system, and it's appropriate for where we are as a jurisdiction in terms of AML-CFT.
And that very thorough and comprehensive response brings a close to this morning's event. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning and for your participation, and we wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you.